right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar. Today's topic is healthy eating for beginners. Before we get started, just a couple normal items to take care of. We will have some time for questions at the end of the presentation, and you can type those in by clicking the Q&A section in the lower portion of your control panel. We will be posting a recording of this webinar on our blog. The link for that will be shown at the end. And if you would like a PDF copy of the presentation, there will be a link to download that on the same post as the recording. If your question does not get answered today or you think of any more, please email our support inbox, which will be shown at the end as well. All right, so what are the big things to chat about today? The topic is healthy eating for beginners, but hopefully even those of you who feel you're in a pretty good spot can get some tips as well. First, we'll talk about why we should be looking to improve our nutrition. Then we'll touch on why we tend to not eat the best things or crave those not so good things. And then we'll talk about some realistic ways to start on that journey to improve your nutrition. So, why do we need to eat healthy? I'm not going to spend a lot of time here as most people know the basics of what nutrition affects, but let's just do a real quick refresher. Nutrition affects pretty much every part of our health. It affects our risk of heart issues. It can contribute to or help protect against risk of cancers. It can affect how our brain functions, thereby affecting our mood and those types of things as well. It affects our physical performance, and the list really could go on and on. Basically, nutrition is the single biggest way we can contribute to our quality of life. It's pretty important. All right, so why is it that most of us know that it's important to eat healthy, right? Most of us know the foods we shouldn't be eating as often, or at least most of them, but we do it anyways. Why is that? Now, this part gets more interesting. So let's talk about the science behind what happens when we eat so-called junk food. Dr. Stephen Witherly is a food scientist, and he wrote a book called Why Humans Like Junk Food. Pretty simple, right? That's what we're looking for. An article by James Clear breaks down the main points of that book, which is what I'm going to share here today. So there are two factors that make eating good food pleasurable. The first is the sensation of eating the food. This includes what it tastes like, aka, sweet or salty, what it smells like, and what it feels like in your mouth. The last part of this, what it feels like in your mouth, is also known as orosensation. So things like the crunch of a chip, the fizz of a soda. Companies spend millions of dollars to figure out the best levels of those things to make you want more. It seems crazy and weird, but it's absolutely true. The second factor in making food pleasurable are the macronutrients. So the blend of protein, fat, and carbohydrates in foods. Companies also know that there's a good blend of these that makes our brains go crazy and want more and more. And you guessed it, they focus a ton of time and energy and money in finding out those things as well. And Witherly also goes into depth on creating cravings within food. So let's talk about the main ways we are literally tricked into eating and overeating, and a lot of times the foods we know aren't great for us. First, we have what is called dynamic contrast. This is a combination of different sensations in the same foods. So you get a crunch, then a creamy filling, that type of thing. Your brain really, really likes those different sensations in the same type of food or in the same food. Next is our salivary response. Certain foods make us salivate or drool more, which actually, there's a function of that. It helps the flavor of the food spread easier in your mouth. So foods like sauces, ice cream, and chocolate all do this. So obviously those are the types of foods that we know aren't super great, but our mouths love them because we can taste the flavor even more because our salivary response is higher. The next is rapid food meltdown and vanishing caloric density. This is a fancy way of saying foods that melt in your mouth. And they melt faster, and then they tell your brain that you aren't eating as much as you actually are. Tricky stuff, right? So it melts so fast that your brain doesn't really even register how much you're actually eating. We've all been there. You eat and eat and eat, and then you feel terrible because your brain finally caught up with your stomach. I talked caloric density here, but there's another factor with calorie density just a point to make. Junk foods are designed to trick your brain into thinking that you're getting good nutrition, but not to give you that full feeling. So junk food has just enough calories that your brain's like, okay, good, we're getting some energy from this stuff. I can use this, but it doesn't have enough calories at that moment to signal that full feeling. Kind of annoying, right? I'm annoyed when I read stuff like that. They're tricking us. The next factor is similar it is the sensory specific response. So our brain doesn't like the same taste over and over again. We get less pleasure as we eat those same flavors. So again, junk foods are specifically designed to avoid this response. According to Dr. Witherly, they provide enough taste to be interesting, but again, similar to that caloric density, that they're not too stimulating that we get less pleasure as we keep eating them. Just another sneaky trick to get us to eat more and more, of course. And then, of course, buy more, right? Because that's their bottom line. And then the last way we're getting kind of duped into eating more junk food is your memories. When you eat something yummy, your brain remembers it. And then the next time you see it, the next time you smell it, or even the next time you read about that food, your brain triggers that memory and you can start to salivate or drool just thinking about it. If you've ever heard of Pavlov's dog, right? It's the same principle. You get trained to respond a certain way to certain triggers. That's what these foods are doing. We are that dog. So those are the scientific ways of why we typically eat unhealthy, or some of the factors anyways. Other factors include the fact that a lot of times it's convenient, right? It's convenient to grab those not so good foods. And also, you're simply in the habit of shopping that way. And habits can be hard to break. And that's what we're going to work on today. But those are just some of the things that we need to keep in mind of why we're reaching for those unhealthy foods sometimes. And I really encourage you to do more research on this topic because it's really interesting. There's a YouTube video with this Dr. Witherly from last year, actually, that talks about these same things. If you do a quick search of his name, it's going to pop up for you. And then I just want to make this clear. Why did I feel like it was important to share this information with you? Why do I want to tell you all of these things that they're doing to tempt you into eating these foods? Well, I want you to know that it's not just you not having enough willpower to stay away from certain foods. It's really easy to blame ourselves when we make bad food decisions. And we can get into a really negative state of mind with ourselves because of it. And yes, you absolutely need to have accountability for your actions and you need to work to change them. But also, we are being targeted by this industry in ways that can be really hard to defend. And it's just important to be informed about that stuff. So while it's not always easy to change these habits, it's absolutely possible and it absolutely can be done. And we're going to talk about that today, different tips to get you started. And I promise you, it's absolutely going to be worth it once you start improving that nutrition because you're going to feel so much better. So on that note, let's get started with some tips on how to make some great changes with your nutrition. Now, there's a million tips out there. There's a lot of great things. So make sure you do your own research as well. But I'm going to give you some things that I've done in my life, some things that we tell our participants a lot. But again, this is not the only resource out there to help eat healthier. Make sure you're doing your own research as well. But anyways, first tip I have is changing your environment. To give you an idea of what I mean by that, there was a study done by a doctor in Boston that was published in the American Journal of Public Health. Basically, they changed the layout of their hospital cafeteria to see what would happen. So all they did was they added bottled water to the main refrigerators that were in the cafeteria, and then they added extra baskets of bottled water just throughout the room. Over the next 3 months, soda sales dropped by 11.4% and bottled water sales increased by 25.8%. Now, they ended up doing similar things to food options and had similar results. Now, there was nothing said to the people who use the cafeteria. There weren't big signs either. Well, there might have been signs, but they didn't change anything else. All they did was change what people saw, what was more visible when they visited. So that's a great example of something that you can do in your own environment. Have healthier foods visible to you and whomever is in your household, and have the not as healthy options not as visible, right? Put your fruits and your veggies on the counter if you can, or at the front of the fridge if that's where you're storing them. Have the unhealthy things in a high shelf behind some other options, right? This is an extremely simple change that can be extremely, extremely effective. So that's a good place to start. And then something kind of similar to, changing your environment, changing your dinnerware is actually something to think about. Now, this is more on the portions side of things over, quality of food changing, but that's a great step in the process of eating healthier as well, just focusing on your portions, right? So changing to a smaller plate can help your brain feel fuller sooner. Because if we see all that empty space in our big plate, our brain says, well, that's not enough food. So change to a smaller plate. And then if you're trying to cut down on soda, same principle, pour it into a tall, skinny glass that doesn't hold as much. And you're going to trick your brain because it's going to see that tall, looks like lots of liquid in there. It's going to say, oh, okay, that's a lot. Good stuff. And then having brighter plates with more contrast to the food that you eat can actually help cut down on portions too. It's a mental thing. Now, I know these can seem kind of silly in a way, but these are backed by research, these things, so it can help. So why not give it a try, right? All those little things in combination is going to add to big changes. The next tip I have is one that builds off the concept that small steps are the very, very best way to make lifelong changes, which if you've watched any of the webinars, you know that I very much agree with. So add one healthy food to your day. When we think about changing our eating habits, most of us go directly to what we need to cut out, right? And that's an important part of eating, but when you're looking to get started, focus on adding something healthy first. This way, you're focusing on a positive change. I can eat this, I'm adding this, and then you can start to explore and find what healthy foods you enjoy. Eventually, you're going to start to use those foods to replace those unhealthy ones, but getting into the habit of adding good foods and good stuff first is going to make that transition a lot easier when you start to look to cut down on other foods. And then as you build, it will not only be one food per day, but then you can move up to one meal per day, then 2 meals, then 1 meal or 1 day per week that is healthy, and so on and so forth, right? Get where I'm going here. Go at your own pace, do what feels right for you. But again, before you know it, the majority of your foods you eat are going to be healthier. And then the next tip is kind of along the same lines. It's about building those good habits gradually and not expecting to be perfect. So basically, if you eat an unhealthy meal, follow it with a healthy one. Make your next meal healthier. You don't have to eat healthy 100% of the time. So if you go out to eat, let's say, and indulge yourself a little bit, just be mindful and make an effort to have that next meal be a healthy one. This can help shift your mindset again, just to focus on those positives and not make yourself believe you're giving up everything, right? You don't have to deny yourself that bad, quote unquote, bad stuff all the time. Just make sure that good stuff is happening too. And then make those ratios a little bit leaning more towards the good stuff than the bad stuff. Okay, next tip. This one is for when you're in the grocery store. Try to avoid those temptation aisles if you can. You know the ones that I mean, the snack aisles, the ice cream aisles, those types of ones. You may have heard the tip of sticking to the perimeter of the store. That's kind of a widely shared tip. And it's a great tip overall, as most of the fresh produce, most of those less processed foods are kept on the outside of the store. But every store is a little bit different. So just be aware of those areas and those aisles that could be tempting you and try to steer clear of them when possible. Now, the next tip for you is For those of you who have other people in your household, family members, others living in your homes that don't have the same goals as you do. Maybe they don't care about their, nutrition, that type of thing. Now, ideally, we wouldn't want to have any unhealthy foods in your house at all, right? If it's not there, you can't eat it. And then if you want something, you have to go out and get it, which adds another barrier to eating those foods too much, which again, that's fantastic. If you can do that, then absolutely do it. But that's not always realistic. So we hear this from a lot of participants. I have to buy such and such food for my spouse or my kids, or my roommate is always bringing home this snack and I just can't stay away from it. One simple thing to try that can help is to label that food. So simply put a big Post-it or a piece of tape that has that other person's name on it of who you bought that food for. So what this does is it makes you stop. If you go into your pantry and your fridge and you go to grab that snack and it's got a label on it that says another name, it's going to make you pause for a split second, right? It's going to give you that time to say to yourself, do I really need this? Do I really want this? Now, again, it's not going to work 100% of the time. I get it. But if our goal is to be better, this can help. Okay. Moving on to a few more things to try. This next step goes a little bit deeper than a simple nutrition hack. Focus on your stress management. So many times we reach for unhealthy foods because we have something going on in our lives that is causing us stress, right? Eating is a major coping mechanism for so many people, myself included. Now, this is a much bigger and more important topic than I have time to spend on today, but looking into your stress management skills and working on ways other than food to deal with stress can make a huge difference in your nutrition and your overall health. We have multiple webinars on our blog to help get started. So do some research there, or, many resources online, or talk with your doctor or your therapist to get on a good track with your brain health to help your choices with nutrition, because they absolutely are connected. The next tip is also a tough one for a lot of us. Practice saying no. Now, saying no can be helpful in a lot of aspects of your life, but for today, I'm going to talk about it in the context of food. So let's touch on another research article to help with this. In the Journal of Consumer Research, a study was published that split students into two groups. The difference in the groups was that one said, I can't, and the other said, I don't. So if they were tempted with ice cream, for example, group A would say, I can't eat ice cream. Group B would say, I don't eat ice cream. The study had them do this in various situations. And then when they thought the study was over and they were just leaving, they were offered a treat. They could have an unhealthy or a healthy treat. Those who said, I can't, during the study took the unhealthy option 61% of the time. The I don't group took it 36% of the time. Pretty good difference there. Now, the reason that changing your wording in this situation is powerful is because when you say, I don't, it's empowering. It gives you that sense of control, right? When you say, I can't, it gives you a sense that you're not in control, that it's not your choice, that you're being forced to do something. So when you're tempted by something that you don't want to regret eating later, start to say out loud or just even to yourself, I don't eat that, and just see what happens. All right, next, make a plan. I'm not going to talk in depth about meal planning today, but I think it's an absolutely fantastic thing to do, and it can help so much in eating healthier. If you have a plan for your food and meals, it's going to help avoid those situations where you make the snap decision to eat something not so healthy, right? It's also going to help with food waste. We hear all the time that people don't buy fresh fruits and veggies, for example, because it ends up going to waste. Now, you can avoid this by having a plan to use those foods for certain meals or certain snack times. Now, you don't have to plan out every single meal for the week. Start with one or however many you can and go from there. Making changes does require work, guys, but if you take it one step at a time, one meal at a time to plan ahead, you're going to have great new habits much sooner than you think. And then along with that, make things fun. Try new things, get your family involved, get creative. Eating healthy does not have to be boring. There are so many ways to use spices and healthy ingredients to make meals. Think of it as a new hobby, like skiing, for example. You might not be very good at it right away, but if you keep trying, you're going to stop wiping out eventually, right? You'll find some great meals and foods to have in your rotation for the week. And also make it your own. What I mean by this is that there are so many ways to eat healthy. What's working for the person next to you isn't necessarily the best way for you. You may have to try a few different things. That's part of it. Why do you think there's so many fad diets out there? Because there's not a one size fits all nutrition plan. I wish there was, because it would make our job a lot easier, believe me, but there isn't. So you have to be an advocate for yourself and do the work to find the best way for you. But again, the great news is there's so many resources and there's so many people like us who want to help. So reach out. All right, moving on. One of the biggest mistakes people make, from my experience, is that they overcomplicate eating well. They think it's that unless it's some fancy structured, you have to eat 7 ounces of this at 4:52 p.m. every day, that it doesn't work. We are brainwashed into thinking that simply eating an apple is too easy. You guys, keep it simple. Eat real foods. You know, for the most part, what is healthy, or at least healthier, right? So just eat more of those better foods than not, and you're winning. And then so it makes sense to pay attention to what you're eating, right? This can be actual tracking, or this can be just you being mindful, depending on how you feel about your nutrition. When we tell people to track their food, we sometimes get a negative response. But if you don't know what you're eating right now, how do you know what to change, right? Tracking your food, in an app like the Health Check 360 app can give you all sorts of valuable information on what is actually in your food. It's a pretty eye-opening experience for most people. Then you can start to make changes or work with someone like a health coach, a nutritionist, or your doctor to help with more ideas and to fine-tune things. You don't have to track for the rest of your life. We just need a small picture of what you're eating, which can create ideas for change. A lot of people say they don't know where to start when it comes to changing their eating. This is where to start if you don't have any direction at all. Track. And then next, give yourself some time and some patience. Progress over perfection is something we say a lot here at Health Check, and it's a great way to stop negative thoughts. We are never going to be perfect, ever. And the wonderful thing is we don't have to be. Keep working on your own journey, look for small things to change and improve, and you will be better off for it. Talk to anyone who's made improvements with their nutrition. Once you cut down on eating those not so good foods, you will crave them less and it will get easier. I know it's hard to believe, but it's absolutely true. So keep at it. And then finally, find your why. This means determining why you want to be healthier and use that as motivation to keep going, especially when times are tough. This could be to simply feel better, to be there for your family, or something like you watched a loved one go through health problems and you want to try to avoid that for yourself. There are a million reasons to want to be healthier. Find your big ones and use them to empower you. Okay, some of you may have noticed that I didn't give you, we didn't go through specific foods to eat. We didn't go into that too much. Now, I did this because, again, like I said, there are many ways to be healthy, and just giving you a food list and saying go is not going to help you make lifelong habits. We have to run our own race, right? You have to be accountable. You have to put some of that effort in. But if you're looking for some more specific ideas, I certainly am not going to leave you hanging here. So first, just a couple of rules of thumb that I've said in other webinars to be mindful of. Eat whole foods as much as you can. Fruits, veggies, whole grains, lower processed meats, as least processed as you can, and other proteins should be the main parts for as many meals and snacks as possible, right? You don't have to be perfect. Again, just do it as much as you can. Sugar, eat foods with as little sugar as possible, as much as you can. I don't count fruits with that, but really, really watch those added sugars in those processed foods, guys. That's a huge, huge, huge plus if you can work on that. And then drink water. more than any other thing that you're drinking. Like I said, keep it simple. It really, really, really can be as easy as that. I've also added a few online resources here for some healthier recipes. Again, millions of places to find healthier recipes, but these are some good ones to get you started. Now, I put these on here because you can search recipes by the meal or the main food ingredient or the type of nutrition style that you want to try, like Mediterranean, like vegetarian, those types of things. So many options for good snacks and foods and things on those places as well. And then, of course, let's give you some recipes as well. I have a recipe for each meal of the day to add to your let's give this a try list. First is breakfast. Got some overnight oat recipes here. The great thing about overnight oats is that you can individualize them with whatever you want. So this one's really simple. It's just oats, cinnamon, nut butter, milk, and then some fruit. And then you put it in the fridge overnight, add the fruit and toppings in the morning. That's it. Boom. Now, I'm going to go through these slides pretty quick here so we have time for questions, but reminder that these will be available for download on the blog within the next 24 hours. So if you want to try these recipes, head there to get them. Don't try to keep up with me flipping the slides because I'm going to go way too fast for you. All right, so there's breakfast. Lunch, easy wrap. This one uses collard leaves instead of a tortilla to gain some nutrients. And then again, adding veggies and some hummus and avocado for the creaminess, and you're done. And again, you can make this your own by adding whatever you like to it as far as those fruits and veggies and stuff. And then a couple different options for supper. Taco zucchini boats are super easy and super good, kid friendly, if I might add with that. So if you want to do ground beef, ground turkey, whatever it is that you like, and then add some peppers, taco seasoning, and then stick them in those zucchinis. There you go. And then, of course, I have to have a pizza option, right? This one uses eggplant instead of pizza dough. So they're little mini pizzas, right? Who doesn't like that? Slice the eggplant, add your favorite pizza toppings, and then cook it like a pizza. Really, really simple. And then, of course, we have to have a dessert recipe, right? Popsicles. This is made with coconut milk and berries. It's a great way to get that sweetness, which without as much of that added sugar that I talked about trying to be mindful of. So again, I know I went through those fast. Those will be available on our blog. And then I just want to summarize for today because I always go up till the very end because I just want to share so much with you guys. Hopefully I gave you some things to think about and some tips to try. But again, keep it simple. Take it one step at a time. Empower yourself by changing your mindset, focusing on the positive, change the way you view your nutrition, and then find your why. And then I love this picture. Let's all take a page from the Dancing Chef's book and have a little fun while we do it, right? All right. Before we open it up for questions here, just a quick review of what we have upcoming. Next month, we're going to talk about some different things to start some exercise. And then in May, we're going to talk about mental health. Great, great topic that we'll talk about in that month. And then if you do have lifestyle rewards, here are some of the questions. Majority of you folks won't need to answer questions. You just submit on your My Health Check 360 account that you watch the webinar. But if you do happen to have questions, this is what they'll be. You'll be able to answer them if you paid attention to me today. And then here's our contact information. We're on all the social media. The blog, that's where you're going to watch this webinar again. That's where you can find those past webinars that I talked about. And that's where you're going to register for the upcoming webinars as well. And then give us a call. Like I said, we want to help. We want to help whatever we can do on this journey for you. Give us a call, shoot us an email. We're more than happy to answer questions or schedule you for a coaching call. And with that, let's get to some questions.